Okay, so in this episode, we're gonna animate this button. I'm also gonna add a little bit more animation to the title effect, but that will be a really quick one. So let's start with the title effect. So I like this in and out bouncy effect of our checkbox. So let's also implement that for our to-do item. So it should be easy enough because we have most of the things already set up. So we'll create a new animation. We can't use the other one because it's now moved inside of a standalone component. So we might make a new one here. We'll call it bounce scale. Actually, just bounce is fine for now. And we'll go with 4 keyframes again. So we start at a scale of, well, let's start at 1. Go to 1.5 and then undershoot it. And then end up as 1 again. So let's do that. And we are just going to place it here. Animation, bounce, forwards, ease and out. So let's see what that gives us. That may be a little bit big. Maybe started from 0.9, go to 0.2, and then 8. Okay, let's see what that does. Actually, I think I like it more when it starts from 1. Okay, perfect. So for the type of animation I have planned for the to-do button, we will need an extra class. We'll just add a clicked class to the button for a few milliseconds. Luckily, we already had set up an event listener and click listener, so we can just add it here. So what we'll do, it's very simple. We have our add to do button dot class list dot add clicked, and then we'll just remove it after a while. So add to do button dot class lists dot remove clicked. That's it. Let's say after 300 milliseconds. Okay, so let's test that out. We have our button. When we click it, we can see that the class is briefly added. So great. We can now add some styling. So one thing I like to do, especially with those kind of buttons, is make sure that you can't accidentally click on twice. So when it has the clicked class, we can simply start by saying pointer events none. So that means that we can't click it anymore. The mouse will not interact with this element. That also means, of course, that we have to turn it back on here. So there we go. And I want an animation here. I'm going to call it Squish. 300 milliseconds. And forwards is not important. We'll just ease in and out. So there we go. That's our animation all set. So let's create our animation. So I will probably reuse those. That's a good starting point for our squish. So now we always scaled with one number, which means you uniformly scale the x and the y axis. But what you can also do is scale with two numbers, so you can scale on the x and the y axis separately, and that way you can create like this squishy effect. So let's try that out. That might actually be a good value. Okay, so let's see what this does. Now, what you can see is that we get this squishy effect because of the way that we scale the x-axis, we make it bigger, and on the y-axis we made it smaller, and we get like this cool bouncy effect. So now I would like to think that this button hits something, so it bounces downwards. So the way we can do that is we go to our button and we set the transform origin to the bottom. You will see now that it seems to bounce downwards. I kind of like that. Now another thing, that let's say that there was the ground was here, you would expect that there's a piece that's completely flat with the ground, because it really gets squished against the ground, and here it has air to retain its shape. So we can sort of fake this effect by using our border radius. So if we make the radius here smaller, we might get this flattening effect. So let me just demonstrate what I mean. So border bottom left radius, if we make this smaller, you get like this effect. If we do that on the other side as well, and then we squish it, then you get kind of this effect. Now it doesn't really work as a freeze frame, but you will see that it will work quite nicely once we use it in a motion. So we'll just start with our default values, I think 32 pixels, and then we'll squish it a little bit. And then we just end up with our same values. So it's only when we squish it downwards that we change the radius, in the other direction we don't do it. So let's see what that looks like. And this gives this nice sort of animated feel to it. So one thing that doesn't sit right with me is I think this first part has to be faster, and then the bounce up already has a lot less force in it, so then it could slow down. So I think what I will do is so this goes really actually, let me test this out first. Because actually So now the downward force is slowly, but then it springs back up a little bit better. Now if we would do the opposite, let's see what that gives us. I feel like this border radius is not really animating properly. I'm not exactly sure why it doesn't. So the problem here is we have to set our border radius to 32 pixels. So it animates from there. So let's see what that looks like. So yeah, that's a lot nicer. So I think we'll end it here. We have, I think, some really smooth animations for our to-dos when we check things off, when we add things. So it seems like a great place to stop, and we'll see you in the next one.